The first thing I saw that morning was a woman halfway through my bedroom window, one hand gripping the curtain and the other clutching the edge of the frame as if she had just escaped from a burning building. Then the sunlight hit her face, and my heart nearly stopped. It was Seraphina Vale, the CEO of the company where I worked, the woman whose photograph appeared on magazine covers and whose name made entire boardrooms go silent. She was wearing an expensive cream-colored suit, but there was dust on one sleeve, her usually perfect hair was slightly messy, and her eyes carried a sadness I had never seen before. I stood frozen beside my bed, holding a cup of coffee, while she struggled awkwardly to climb inside. I looked at her, looked at my broken window latch, and finally said the first foolish thing that came to my mind. I caught my CEO climbing through my window and joked, "Nothing to steal here." She stopped, looked directly into my eyes, and smiled in a way that somehow felt more painful than tears. Then she whispered, "How about you? If you believe kindness can change a life and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub." Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of a story nobody could have predicted. My name is Everett Rowan, and before that strange morning, I had never imagined my life could become a story worth telling. I was 32, working as a junior financial analyst at Vale Horizon, a company famous for turning struggling businesses into successful ones. From the outside, my life looked ordinary, but behind the rented apartment walls, everything was held together by careful calculations. My father had passed away several years earlier, my mother depended on me, and every month I sent money to my younger sister, Marlo, who was studying nursing. I had learned to live without vacations, expensive clothes, or unnecessary dreams. My apartment was small, bright during the day, and filled with second-hand furniture, old books, and the smell of coffee. I liked mornings because they were quiet. The city outside my window would slowly wake beneath the golden sunlight, children would walk toward school, shopkeepers would lift their shutters, and for a few peaceful minutes I could pretend that life was simple. But that morning, peace ended when Seraphina Vale climbed through my window. She was not supposed to be there. Nobody knew that my apartment sat directly above an old bakery whose rear staircase connected to the neighboring office building. Later I would learn that Seraphina had been followed that morning by a man working for the very people trying to destroy her company. She had discovered evidence of financial fraud inside Vale Horizon, and someone had attempted to force her into signing documents that would make her responsible for millions of dollars in losses. She had escaped through a service corridor, crossed the rooftops, and reached my building because she knew there was one person who might help her. Me. That fact shocked me more than her unexpected entrance. I was not a powerful executive. I was not wealthy. I was not connected. I was simply the employee who had once stayed late to help her carry boxes after an office relocation. She remembered that day. I had forgotten it. Seraphina quickly explained that she needed somewhere safe for a few hours. Her phone was damaged, her security team could not be trusted, and someone had been monitoring her movements. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but when I looked at her face, I saw fear behind the confidence everyone knew her for. So I gave her my spare jacket, turned off the lights, and told her she could stay. We spent the next hour sitting in silence while the sounds of the city grew louder outside. Sunlight filled my little living room, exposing every crack in the walls and every cheap piece of furniture, and I suddenly felt embarrassed that the most powerful woman I knew was sitting on my old sofa. But Seraphina looked around and said nothing judgmental. Instead, she noticed the photographs on my shelf. One showed my mother smiling in a hospital corridor. Another showed Marlo receiving a scholarship. She studied them carefully and asked about my family. For the first time, I saw the woman behind the CEO. Her story was not what I expected. Seraphina had grown up in a small apartment with a single mother who cleaned offices at night. She had worked 3 jobs before earning a scholarship and eventually building a career powerful enough to make people assume she had always belonged among the wealthy. But success had cost her almost everything personal. Her mother had died before seeing her become CEO. She had no close friends left because every relationship eventually became a negotiation. People wanted favors, positions, contracts, money, or access. She told me that sometimes she stood in a crowded room and felt completely invisible because nobody was looking at Seraphina anymore. They were only looking at the CEO. That confession changed something inside me. Until then, I had admired her from a distance, perhaps even feared her a little. But sitting across from her in my tiny apartment, I realized that power did not protect anyone from loneliness. Sometimes it made loneliness worse. I made her breakfast because it was the only thing I knew how to do. Eggs, toast, and coffee. She laughed softly when she saw the cracked plate I served it on. For a few minutes, we forgot about the danger outside. We talked about ordinary things. She told me she loved old movies. I told her I collected broken watches because my father had taught me how to repair them. She smiled and said she had never met anyone who collected broken things. I answered that broken things were often worth fixing if someone cared enough to try. By noon, we had uncovered enough information to understand the truth. A senior executive named Calder Voss had been secretly moving company funds into shell accounts, planning to blame Seraphina when the missing money was discovered. He had also manipulated members of the board. If Seraphina returned to headquarters without proof, she would be removed before she could defend herself. The evidence was hidden in a backup system that only a few employees knew existed. I was one of them. Suddenly, the ordinary analyst who had been worried about his electricity bill found himself standing beside the woman who controlled one of the biggest companies in the city, preparing to expose a conspiracy. We spent the afternoon working from my dining table. Sunlight moved slowly across the floor as files opened, numbers were compared, and old transactions revealed patterns nobody had noticed. My mother called during the middle of it, and I stepped into the kitchen to answer. She asked why I sounded nervous. I told her I was working from home. She laughed and said I should remember to eat. When I returned, Seraphina was staring at the photograph of my father. She told me she wished she had asked her mother more questions before it was too late. That was the moment I understood why she had come to my window. She had not only been looking for a hiding place. She had been looking for someone she believed would do the right thing even when there was nothing to gain. By late afternoon, we had the evidence. But getting it to the board was dangerous. Calder had already arranged a meeting where Seraphina would be blamed for everything. We needed someone inside the building who could upload the files without being noticed. I volunteered. Seraphina immediately refused. She said I had a family depending on me and that I could lose my career. I told her that if we stayed silent, hundreds of employees could lose theirs. She looked at me for several seconds and asked why I cared so much. I answered that my father had once told me something simple: your character is what you do when nobody can reward you for it. We entered the headquarters shortly before sunset. The building was glowing with golden daylight, but the atmosphere inside felt cold. Executives gathered in the conference room, whispering as Seraphina walked in beside me. Calder looked shocked to see her alive and even more shocked to see me carrying the evidence. For several terrifying minutes, he tried to dismiss everything as fabricated. Then the files appeared on the conference screen. Transfers. Dates. Account numbers. Private messages. Every piece of evidence connected back to him. The room became silent. One by one, the board members realized they had been manipulated. Security officers approached Calder, and for the first time, I saw fear on the face of a man who had spent years making other people afraid. Seraphina could have destroyed him publicly. Instead, she simply told the board that the truth mattered more than revenge. That sentence stayed with me. She had every reason to become cruel, yet she chose accountability without hatred. The investigation began that evening, and within weeks Calder was removed and later faced serious legal consequences. Seraphina kept her position, but something changed after that day. She stopped hiding behind the image of an untouchable CEO. She started visiting employees without cameras, listening to their problems, and creating a fund for workers facing family emergencies. She also promoted people based on their work rather than their connections. As for me, I received a promotion, but that was never the most important reward. My mother received better medical care. Marlo finished nursing school. Our financial worries slowly became manageable. And Seraphina remained part of my life, not as my boss, but as someone who had learned to trust another human being. Months later, on a warm Saturday morning, I was sitting by the same window where everything had started. The latch had finally been repaired. I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Seraphina stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. She looked at the window and laughed. I told her that next time she wanted to visit, she could use the front door like a normal person. She smiled and said she had considered it, but then she remembered what I had said that morning. Nothing to steal here. I smiled and asked if she still thought there was something worth taking. She looked at me quietly and said that some people do not steal your life, they remind you that your life is worth living. That sentence stayed with me long after she left. We spend so much of our lives believing we must become richer, stronger, more successful, or more important before we deserve happiness. But sometimes the most valuable thing we can give another person is simply kindness when they have nothing to offer us. Seraphina had entered my home as a frightened woman running from betrayal, and she left as someone who had remembered how to trust. I had opened my window because I thought I was helping a stranger, but in the end, she helped me understand my own strength. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub for more emotional stories of hope, courage, and second chances. And before the story ends, I want you to do something special. Comment, "Kindness deserves a second chance," if you believe one good person can change another person's life. Because sometimes, the person standing outside your window is not there to steal anything from you. Sometimes they are there because, somewhere along the way, they lost everything they believed in, and your small act of kindness may be the one thing that helps them find their way home. And sometimes, without realizing it, while you are saving someone else, you discover that you were the one who needed saving all along.